Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. I am Drew Schlussel with Wasabi, and with us today is our guest Dustin Albertson from Veeam. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad you could attend. If you have any questions throughout the day, there is a question box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put your questions in there, and we'll get to them just as soon as we can. So for today's webinar, we're going to cover why immutability and object lock matter, right? What does it mean to you and your business? We're going to specifically talk a bit about Wasabi's new S3 object lock implementation. We're going to give you a demo of that, and then we're going to talk about how Wasabi and Veeam together can keep your data safe without breaking the bank. So without further ado, here is Dustin Albertson from Veeam.
Hey, thank you, Drew. So what we're going to take a look at here is immutability. And what we have on the screen is, as you advance through, you'll see that we have all the reasons why you should have a backup, right? But we're going to be focusing on the malicious attack side of the business, the ransomware, the malicious actors, things like that. So everybody knows that Veeam has this 3-2-1 rule, right? And that's primarily what you should be doing with your data. But we're adding some things to that. We're going a step further now. So it's now 3-2-1-1-0, and what we mean by that is the 1 and the 0 is you now need to have an offsite copy that is offline and air gapped, or what we call immutable, and as well as that, making sure that it has no errors, performing a backup verification. Doing these backup restores every so often and making sure that they're viable so that when you do need them, they're there for you. So, what does this look like? So as we, build out this slide, you can see that what it needs is a scale out backup repository. And what a scale out backup repository is within Veeam is a collection of repositories. And then Veeam handles the smartness of where that data should go. So you can see here we have a performance tier and we have a capacity tier. The performance tier is going to be all your data that's on-prem, all your DAS, NAS, dedupe appliances and things like that. And then the capacity tier is going to be a Wasabi object lock bucket. So object lock is what we're here to talk about, and this will be what we dive into. But I also want to make note that Wasabi is Veeam ready. They are Veeam ready object, and they are now Veeam ready object with immutability. And we'll get into what that means here in a second as well. So as we move on, so what does it look like when you create an object storage bucket for a scale out repo? You can see that here. It's basically just a checkbox within Veeam that says, hey, keep my recent backups immutable for 30 days. We'll go into what does immutable mean? What does that mean within the concept of backups? But it's really that simple. It's a simple process to do on both the Veeam side and the Wasabi side. So immutability in the simplest terms is a period of time to where that backup data cannot be changed. So if we move on to the next slide, things that we want to focus here on are going to be security, right? So the whole concept of this is that data needs to be secure. We're doing encryption. We're making sure that that data is encrypted from the second it's being backed up all the way through the whole process. Also, immutability uses a API developed by S3 called object lock. And essentially what it's doing is locking each individual object instead of locking a whole bucket. Because there'll be periods of time to where data within a bucket, some of it may need to be locked, some of it may not. So object lock gives you that finer granularity to be able to do that kind of locking. And as you can see, it also prevents the deletion of that blocks of data or objects and any metadata associated with it until that expiration date is met. And this is available now for the Wasabi object lock buckets. So as we move on, you'll see that immutability again is guaranteeing that that data is locked. It's preventing malicious users, malicious actors, ransomware from spreading and infecting that data or deleting it or locking it. When we say copy and move mode here, so there's two modes within Veeam for when we're migrating or transitioning data to object storage. One is a copy mode and one is a move mode. Copy instantly copies that data to object as soon as it's backed up, and move mode is a tiering mechanism, so it moves it after a certain period of time. Both of those modes are fully supported with object lock as well. And again, it protects only the most recent and more important backup points, so that you can say, hey, maybe if I have my copy mode set up and I have immutability on it, it's going to protect it as soon as it's taken. So this is the 1-0 portion of what we're talking about there. And as we move on, you'll see that under this one, expiration and block logic or block generation, what that means is, so let's say you set an immutability period of 3 days. So we're going to add some time to that. Veeam is doing this on the back end. We're adding 10 days to that. And the reason why we do that is called block generation. What we're trying to do is save cost, because there's a high probability that that block or that object of data is going to be reused in future backups. So by adding this little buffer of time, we're prolonging that object lock period a little bit, but we're also making sure that that data, those blocks, are not going to be, let's say, again, that 3-day period, they're not going to be unlocked in 3 days and then deleted, and we could have reused them. We could have saved that upload speed. We could have saved all those API calls, all of that. So this is kind of just a little safety mechanism that we're doing automatically on the back end. So as we move on to the next slide, you'll see that, again, so the supported object storage platform that we're doing here is going to be Wasabi Object Lock Bucket. We support compliance, and we'll get into that, what that means here in a second, and governance is not supported. I think Drew will cover this here in a second, what the 3 modes are. Yep. But there's basically 3 modes to object lock, and it's basically different layers of protection.
Yep.
Yep. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see that, again, immutability here is all about prohibiting the deletion of that data and taking full advantage of that object lock technology. And what it means here is that you can't, all of these things can't be performed. So when we have the compliance mode enabled and we're sending data there, you cannot manually remove that data. You cannot remove that data via a retention policy. You can't, the cloud provider can't remove that data. If anything, it would have to go through the tech support, department. It would have to be a really good reason. The whole point of this is so that that data cannot be removed, and it can only be removed once that data has expired. And that's all done with, the period of time that you set up from the get-go.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that point, certain modes will allow certain people with permissions to make adjustments. Other modes will not, and that speaks to some of the compliance issues that we're going to talk about today.
Correct. Yeah. That's one reason why Veeam went with the compliance mode is for that whole being locked down and not having a root admin or a root permission user to be able to remove that data. Again, we went over it, but I just wanted to highlight it again. We had that fixed 10-day generation period to what you set, and we're doing that to make sure that we're not moving data multiple times and saving bandwidth and API charges and all of that, which you don't have in Wasabi, but again, it's performance metrics and things like that. Again, once it's copied with immutability, there's no way to change that immutability period, meaning that you can't lower it, but you can extend it or adjust it for anything new backup copies. I just want to highlight that there. So you can't lower it, you can't make it shorter for anything that's already copied up there, but you can lower it for anything new, or you can extend it for anything that's up there. So it's a good point to hit on there. And I just want to kind of wrap it up on this slide, for me at least. Again, I wanted to highlight the importance of this. Object lock is a really cool feature, and we've been waiting for Wasabi to have this because it's just a great feature for them to have, and it's a great feature to use. But I just want to highlight again that 1-0 here that we have in green, right? You should be using this technology. You should be leveraging this for anything new going forward. And you should totally make sure that you're testing your backups. I don't have any specific slides in here or anything, but I want to bring up a use case of instant VM recovery, right? So you can do an IVMR or instant VM recovery directly out of Wasabi and test that backup. I mean, this process takes under 5 minutes to restore this backup, get it into your VMware environment, and make sure that it's running. And that runs from Wasabi's storage. So it's not like you have to pull it back down local and do anything. You can run that, that recovery and test it and validate that that machine does in fact work, and you're testing that backup. You should be doing this constantly. So I'll stop harping right there, Drew, and pass it off to you, and we'll go into Wasabi's side of this.
Thanks, Dustin. So let's talk for just a moment about what it is that Wasabi has brought out here, and we're thrilled to get this one out the door, especially because we know so many of our customers, joint customers, are looking for this kind of additional data protection. I won't rehash what immutability is, right? I think you did a great job covering that. I will point out that there is multiple ways of implementing this, or excuse me, of using this S3 object lock, right? And we're going to support all of them. So we're going to support compliance mode. We're going to support governance mode. We're also going to support legal hold. So if you are, for whatever reason, not using a backup application like Veeam, and perhaps looking at using this feature programmatically, rest assured that it is fully compatible with the S3 spec. Talking about compliance mode, as I was hinting at earlier, right? Once you lock that object, you cannot unlock it. Nobody can unlock it. And I mean nobody. Nobody at Wasabi, nobody at Veeam. So, as Dustin said, be very careful, and perhaps maybe do an experiment or two just to make sure you've got the recipe working correctly, because one wrong keystroke and you might have quite a bit of storage locked up for quite a while. Governance mode is probably where most people have experienced using immutability already. Wasabi has had the ability to lock a bucket or set a bucket policy so that every object going into that bucket inherits a default retention period. We still have it, and you can use it in conjunction with compliance mode so that if an object is placed in a bucket without a default, it can have a default applied to it through the bucket policy. I'm probably getting way too deep into the weeds here, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of flexibility. If you're just looking for one policy to rule all your objects by default, governance is probably where you want to look, because that is something that gives you a little more flexibility in terms of who can or can't make any changes. And last but not least, there is legal hold. In this case, somebody or some application puts a hold on an object until that hold is released by the same person or somebody with greater permission. The lock cannot be removed. So there you are, compliance, governance, and legal hold. And then, of course, just to revisit this, right? Veeam backup and replication, right? Definitely works as we've been certified with the object with immutability stamp to go along with the object support. Very important thing to point out, there's no additional cost for this feature, right? This feature is included with Wasabi, and there is no additional cost from Veeam to implement it either. And really, this is, I think, in my opinion, probably the best way to protect all of your data, the maximum possible security to prevent all the various disaster scenarios that we pointed out earlier, as well as the inside operations. I think we're all keenly aware of even the bigger ransomware stories that are in the news lately. You've probably heard of the fuel transportation system that's currently shut down, and another good reason to make sure that you're doing all you can to protect your data. All right, so enough about talking about it. I think at this point we're going to go ahead and introduce you to our good friend from Wasabi, Chris Rushton, and Chris is going to give you a demo of Object Lock and how it works with Veeam.
Thank you, Drew, for the great overview. Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Rushton. I am a channel solution architect over here at Wasabi, and today we are going to be doing a demo on creating an object lock bucket in the Wasabi console, as well as setting up an object lock repository or immutable repository in Veeam. First step is to log in to your Wasabi console at console.wasabisys.com, going to your bucket tab and clicking Create Bucket. We're going to type in a bucket name, and then select a region. We're going to use the US1 region in this example. Click Next, and you will see a new item down here called Object Locking, and it says versioning must be enabled. So we're going to enable the bucket versioning toggle, and now we're going to enable the object locking toggle. You can go ahead and click Next, and we see in the review screen that object locking is permanently enabled. Click Create Bucket, and now you have a bucket with object lock created on it. Now that you have your object lock bucket created, we want to view the settings of that bucket. So we're going to click on the settings option, and instead of the original Wasabi compliance tab here, you're going to have an object lock tab. Now, the original Wasabi compliance is not enabled on this bucket. It is the new object locking. Here you can see the bucket level defaults. Now, if you notice, they're not enabled by default, but you can turn them on. However, using third-party applications, specifically Veeam in this case, is not supported with these settings. And what these settings do are dictate when you place a new object into the bucket, whether that item automatically comes with a retention hold on it or not. If you enable this, every item placed into the bucket will have, for example, a 5-day retention period on it on which it is immutable. Veeam handles this internally, so you do not have to worry about setting any default object locking policies on the bucket. In fact, Veeam does not even support enabling these options. And for the next portion, we're going to be setting up a clean instance of Veeam backup and replication to our Wasabi object lock bucket that we just created. So in order to do that, you're going to need to make sure that you've created a bucket using either the CLI or the console that has object lock enabled on it. The first step is going to be making sure that we have a local performance tier in order to store the data locally with Veeam. So I'm going to use a directly attached storage on this system. I've already created a folder, so we can call this Wasabi local tier, and I'm just going to browse to my existing path. This folder is empty, and we're just going to hit continue through the whole setup process. So our backup repository has been created. We want to hit no here to change the default backup location. Now we're going to add our object storage repository. This is where we select S3 compatible to add Wasabi in. And since we created the bucket in the US East region, we're going to use the main Wasabi URL, s3.wasabisys.com. And I've already imported my keys to the account. We're going to select the bucket that we created, my Wasabi object lock, and we're going to create a new folder inside of it. We'll call that data. And now the most important part, we're going to check this box to make recent backups immutable for 10 days. And when you do this, Veeam will reach out to Wasabi and validate that object locking is enabled on the bucket. Since that was successful, we see the summary here and we can click finish. And now we have our local tier and our Wasabi object storage with immutability turned on through Veeam. So before we can use it, the last thing that we need to do is add a scale out backup repository. We're going to give that a name, and we're going to add our local performance tier that we just created. We're going to leave this option alone, and now we're going to extend this capacity tier over onto our object repository storage that we just created. And we're going to remove the move backup options because we won't need it for the demo, but we'll have the copy backups to object storage as soon as they're created in order to put data onto Wasabi. Once this finishes, we should be good to go to set up a backup job. We're going to go ahead and click Backup Job to create a standard backup job on a virtual machine. And we're going to leave the name default and then add a test machine, which is one of our small backup VMs. It's only 16 gig, so it should go pretty quickly. And then we're going to change the retention policy to 1 day. And the most important part would be to select the new Wasabi scale out backup repository that we created. This will ensure that the backups get copied over to Wasabi. We're going to hit next and continue through this setup. And then we want to run the job when I click finish. So as you can see, the job immediately started to run after creation of the backup job. And what's happening now is that Veeam is going out to the virtual machine and creating a backup of it. Once this portion finishes, an offload job will run and immediately copy over the data to Wasabi, and it will place the proper retention periods on that data. As you can see, the offload job has been completed, so Veeam made the backup and then copied it over to Wasabi. We're going to take a look inside the bucket that we created earlier and check out the retention period that Veeam has placed on the new data. So we'll maneuver into the directory structure that Veeam creates and take a look at our checkpoint. We have an object locking mode of compliance, and we have a retain until date of May 15th, which is tomorrow. And we can also see the legal hold status, which is off. As far as I'm aware, Veeam does not support any type of legal hold, and you should not use any legal hold inside Wasabi on Veeam type objects. The last part of our demo here is what happens if we try and delete the local backup stored on Veeam when it's been placed in immutable storage on Wasabi. So we're going to select the restore point, which we had just created, and try and delete it, simulating an accidental delete. So this is the local copy, and it asks us if we also want to delete the backup from the scale out backup repository. We're going to say yes here. And Veeam is going to talk to Wasabi and see if the objects are able to be deleted and delete them. If not, it's going to throw an error. So as you can see, Veeam reached out to Wasabi and it says it's unable to delete the local backups because it's marked as immutability until May 15th at 9:35 a.m. So through Veeam, you are unable to delete the local copy of data if the Wasabi data is marked as immutable. And that's the end of the demo. Back to you, Drew. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're back. Thank you, Chris, for that. Really appreciate it. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap us up, tell you just a little bit more about Wasabi, just in case you didn't know enough. So Wasabi is definitely the next generation of cloud storage companies. We really set out to make things simple, easy to understand. We're very focused on our channel partners as well as being aligned with our technology partners, with folks like Veeam, and really focus a lot on cost effectiveness, right? We definitely see that in the market, there is a lot of opportunity for you to pay a lot more money. And that usually is in terms of additional fees, right? There's API fees, there's small object taxes, there's retrieval fees, egress fees. It starts to look like the old cell phone billing statements, or even your cable bill, right? Lots of fees and no good explanation for why they're there. So with that in mind, we really strive to keep it simple and make sure that you have the ability to spend your money on doing the research and the work with the data instead of spending all your money storing it. On that note, right, we see Wasabi and Veeam as a better together solution, right? You know, top line for both companies, no extra costs, right? Very clear, very transparent what you're paying for. Nobody's holding your data hostage, right? Stored using standards, and you can move it at will. Both are aligned to high performance, right? We each have our secret sauce to make sure that not only are you storing and backing up your data efficiently, you're also retrieving it very efficiently, get you back into business, all right? Very focused on data protection, encryption, and also giving you flexibility in how you pay for it. Wasabi currently has a pay-as-you-go, but we also have a reserve capacity model. So you can buy your storage in blocks for 1, 3, and 5 years. So there you go. There's the pitch. If you'd like to learn more about this solution, about Veeam and Wasabi with Object Lock, be sure to visit our website, specifically for our Veeam partnership at wasabi.com/Veeam. Dustin, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you chiming in. Any last words?
No, yeah, thank you for let me join you once again. And I saw on the last slide there, you know, under Veeam, it said no vendor lock-in, but I guess we could kind of make a pun out of we are trying to lock you in in this situation, but
Shh, no, don't tell them that.
But no, yeah, everything's good. And you know, again, thank you, and I'm ready to answer some questions if you have any.
Appreciate that. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and answer some questions. Thanks everybody for listening in.
Thank you, Drew and Dustin. We have about a half hour to answer some questions. I see more coming in. There should be a box kind of just below where you see our faces now, so feel free to submit them. I'm going to start a poll. We are curious, when do you see yourself implementing Object Lock? So feel free to answer that. I'll do one more kind of housekeeping item. There is a tab next to the questions that says resources. There you'll find a link to feature briefs, solution briefs, our Veeam and Wasabi landing page, as well as free trials for both Veeam and Wasabi if you are not currently a user. So don't forget to check that out. All right, let's dive into some questions as people are answering the poll. First, can I enable Veeam immutability on an existing bucket?
Awesome. So the question is no. It's not a limitation of Wasabi or Veeam in any way. It has to do with how the object locked API works. The recommended procedure, or the procedure that you should follow, would be to create a new bucket with object lock enabled, and then point your new backups your existing jobs to that new bucket and move forward that direction. Let your old backups age out. This really has to do with again how object lock works. It uses versioning on the back end to be able to tell new versions of objects, and that is really the reason why you can't really use an existing bucket. So long answer is to say no. You need to create a new bucket and just move that way forward.
Right out of the chute.
Yep.
Yep.
So then, Dustin, do you have any kind of recommendations for how I would move my data over from, my existing bucket? How do I, set up my new bucket, and then what?
Carefully. No, it's realistically just like what I said, right? So you would just create a new scale out backup repository with a new object lock bucket at Wasabi, and just change your backup jobs to the new location, and say, from this day forward, we're going this direction with the immutable bucket, and you can leave the old bucket there and just kind of let it age out, let it die out on its own. Otherwise, just rip the Band-Aid off, start fresh, going to Wasabi, or you can phase it out. It is, it can be a cumbersome task just because if you have a ton of data up there, but it's the benefits far outweigh the limitations, right? So unfortunately, that's the way it has to go, just how the object lock works, but it's worth it, right?
Absolutely. If my company is on V10, do I need a certain Veeam license in order to use object lock?
Good question. I'll answer this in two ways. So one is versions, and then one is licenses. So in version 10, you can connect up to object lock, so you don't have to be on version 11. We would love for you to upgrade to V11 with all the new features and blah, blah, blah. But you can totally connect to an object lock bucket on version 10. As far as licensing across all versions, you'll need to have a Enterprise or Enterprise Plus license. And that could be a VUL license, Veeam Universal license as well. So the standard license will not be able to connect. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Am I able to restore using Veeam data that is marked immutable?
Yes. You can totally restore. The data, of course, is you can even do instant VM recovery out of Wasabi with object lock data. So it's completely restorable. It is just not editable. You can't add to it. You can't change the data that's already in there. Things like that.
And Drew, when is this option available?
So we're anticipating GA this week, and as soon as that lands, we'll let everybody know.
What is the max throughput in terms of, oh man, my questions just jumped halfway through asking it. What is my max throughput in terms of bandwidth for downloading backups in a DR scenario?
I mean, it depends on the max throughput of your bandwidth, right? Like it's that's such a hard question to answer, but you're really going to be limited by your bandwidth more so than the performance of Wasabi or the ingest within Veeam. Yep. So yeah, I would say in most cases, I see your bandwidth being the issue, not necessarily hardware on your on-prem side or Wasabi being the limiting factor.
So best thing to do there, do some restore testing, right? Do some measurements. If you're finding some gaps in your architecture where the bandwidth is choked, there's different ways to address that, right? There's direct connect options through Wasabi. If you're finding obviously you need stronger links in your own organization, well, it's a good place to start. But definitely recommend you do some testing to figure out now what that is going to be before you're under the gun trying to restore a critical VM, and then you find out that your 56K dial-up modem just doesn't cut it anymore.
And that's a good point. Is that's one of the powers of Wasabi is that you're not going to get charged for testing it. So test that data. Pull back a file and see how long it takes.
That's
do
right.
a restore, and you don't get taxed like you do other places. So use it.
Absolutely. I'm doing a quick check-in on our poll. So our question is, when do you see yourself implementing object lock? We're at 55% said as soon as possible or this month. So definitely a high demand for this. 27% said in the next 3 months. 8% was 3 to 9 months from now, and another 8% for in the next year. And no one said that they don't want to implement object lock. So props to you all. We're very excited as well.
Y'all get to stay in the webinar. Good answers.
All right. Is object lock just for deletion protection, or is it protected from any changes at all?
It's protected from any changes at all. So yeah, it is a locked file. It can't be edited. The only thing that can be done to it is that you can extend the lock. So if you, let's say you set it for 10 days and you decide, a 9th day that you want to extend it to 20 days, you can extend that period to 20 days. But yeah, no data or anything contained in that object can be edited.
Right. And that includes the metadata.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there a version of object lock coming for Veeam 0365 backups?
Maybe.
I love that answer.
I think that's a tune into Veeam on next week, and you can probably get some more insight to where Office 365 backup is going.
Yeah. Make your one thing I can say is turn into Veeam on, but also if make your request known on the forums. Go to Veeam forums and just put in your 2 cents and make it known.
Thanks. Can I delete anything if I don't delete it from the Wasabi backup? So can it be deleted straight from the file structure?
I'll say the long answer to this is no. But I'll give you a quick rundown of object lock and how it works. So theoretically, I could go into the Wasabi console. I could browse for a file or an S3 browser or whatever. I could browse for a file and I can hit delete, and it would make it delete from the Wasabi console. But that file is still there. What happens is versioning puts this thing called a delete marker on the file, and it makes it disappear from the console. But if Veeam were to try to recover that data, we know the version ID number. So we can pull that data back because it's not been deleted. It's just been removed from the console, but it's still locked for that period of time. So long story there is that, you may be able to make it disappear from the console, but it's still there. We can restore from it. And I can even go into, an S3 browser, find that file and remove that delete marker and bring it back into the console. So again, long story there is that you can make it disappear, but it's not really gone. It's still there.
Gotcha. How do I ensure that files or objects being sent to Wasabi do not carry malicious code, whether it's being sent from Veeam or any other backup?
Yeah, I mean, good question. Is you can't really. I mean, you're just assuming that the backup that we're taking is protected, and you're relying on other front end, I would say, operations like antivirus or scans and stuff like that to make sure that the data that you're backing up is indeed viable. But there are things that we do on the back end, I'll say, to kind of help mitigate that. We have a thing called secure restore or staged restore, where you can restore some data into a walled off environment, scan it with an antivirus to make sure that it is good, and then continue the restore. But otherwise you're reliant upon making sure that data is protected in the front end. But it won't harm anything. Like if you figure out later, I got a virus on this date, well, you just know that backup it has a virus on it and is protected. But yeah, Drew, you want to add on to that?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, it's GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're not keeping your system clean, that's the first place to start. Second of all, I think we talked earlier about the fact that you can do a restore to a quarantined system or a quarantined environment, right? Run scans against that and then move it into production, right? So there are other ways to protect yourself if you believe that what you've already backed up is perhaps contaminated, right? You can try to address that contamination after the restore, but you just have to segment that restore properly. I kind of laughed early when the question was asked, more of a nervous laugh, because your backup software just doesn't have that capability of discerning between what is safe and what is not safe to back up. Right? That's a whole nother part of your data integrity. Wasabi, for our part, we do a number of integrity checks at ingest throughout the life of the data on the system. And then as part of bringing your data back, right, we do continuous integrity checking. But you've got to bring us clean data to start with.
Thank you both. Is there any step-by-step on doing a trial restore from Veeam or with Veeam from Wasabi with the object lock enabled?
It would, so yes. I mean, the short answer is yes. I know that Wasabi has some guides on their site. But from our point of view, it's the same restore that you would do no matter what. So if you go to the tech center guides within Veeam, you can just perform a regular restore, or perform a instant VM recovery. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from our point of view, it's no difference. It's just a object lock data.
Yeah. The immutability doesn't affect the process.
Yeah.
It just affects whether or not that file can be deleted or modified while it sits in the object store, right? No impact on your ability to bring it back and put it back into production.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is there any advantage to setting the immutable period to less than 79 days in Veeam?
No. It's an oddly specific question, but no, the object lock date is going to be based upon your business requirements, right? Like how long you want to keep these backups locked for. I would say there's no performance reason or Veeam reason on why you should choose, 10 days versus 69 days versus 100 days, whatever. So yeah, it's really dependent upon how long you want to make sure that these backups are locked, because that does have business reasons why you would keep them shorter versus longer because of costing, more so than ransomware protection or something like that.
And I'm skipping ahead here, seeing another related question about the fact that when you use immutability, it locks your local copy. I think that's another consideration, right? So you have your business rules in terms of retention, but you have some capacity planning considerations in terms of your high performance local storage. So you probably need to strike a balance between your governance or compliance regulations, as well as your ability to work from your local copies.
You could eliminate that with the tiering mode, though. So so
that's what I was hoping.
Yeah, I only want to keep 10 days on performance tier local.
Yep.
And then move everything else to Wasabi, and then that way you could kind of help mitigate the cost on-prem, and then keep a longer object lock enabled in Wasabi. Yeah.
Good answer.
I see a question there as well that it's one that I kind of want to address. They say, how do I set a forever object lock? While Wasabi would be extremely happy that you set a forever object lock, this is one of those situations where you need to sit down and think it out before you do it. Because there may be, I can see compliance reasons you may want to set it for X amount of years or something like that. But man, you make a mistake and you lock an extremely large backup file for forever. That's going to be a pretty bad situation. Within Veeam, we put some kind of guardrails around that. So there are ways that we have a limit on the amount of days that you can set, but there are ways to bypass that with the reg key and things like that. But it's for that reason. We don't want a user to make a mistake and object lock something for 15 years, 20 years. I can't think of any backup I've needed, 20 years ago.
Well, I think then we're kind of blurring the line then between backup and archive.
Yeah.
Right. And that might be a separate, we'll do that as our next webinar, right? Immutable archiving. But yeah, I think also to the point is you can go back and extend locks. So, to be safe, and especially as you're starting to work your way towards using immutability, probably preferable to use shorter retention times, just in case.
Oh.
And then as you become more comfortable and confident that your system is tuned properly, right, you can start pushing those maxes higher and higher.
Drew, I have a couple different questions about Wasabi data center locations and kind of where they are now, and then what expansion looks like specifically for UK and Africa.
Interesting. So we have a number of presences in North America. I don't have my cheat sheet right in front of me. It's
two in Virginia,
one in Oregon,
and one in Dallas.
Thank you. I just got it up. We have a location in Amsterdam, Tokyo, and we are constantly exploring new opportunities. Right. I think to answer the question about where do we go next, give us a holler. Let us know where you want to see us next. We'd love to have that conversation with you. If you follow us in social media, you'll see David Friend's latest interview talking about our model of expansion and the fact that we respond to the market demand in terms of where we put our next data centers. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
If I want to do this in 2022, so object lock, in doing a trial, file a trial now, and I don't want to then use it for a while, what happens to the data after the trial expires?
So to anybody coming on board to Wasabi, please read the customer terms, customer contract. This is covered in that. If you were to do a trial account and the trial expires, we delete the account and the data goes with it. We do not retain the account for some period of time. So if you went away for a week and came back, the data's gone. That's just the nature of how we operate and how we manage our capacity. And if you need a longer trial period or you need greater capacity, again, contact us. We'd love to work with you. Talk to our partners. They'll make you happy.
If I add a new archive tier that is immutable to the scale-out backup repository, would that avoid the rehydration of data from the existing S3 bucket?
I'm not sure I follow that one. So one thing I want to clarify is that archive tier in Veeam means something completely different. I think they may be confusing our V11 new archive tier, which supports Glacier and Deep Archive, because we have capacity tier and now archive tier. Capacity tier is what's needed or what can be used with Wasabi. You can't use archive tier with Wasabi. It's two different things that we're discussing. So maybe that answers it. If not, put it back in the chat window and we'll try to get to it. Yeah,
we do not have tiers. We just have one service, right? Yeah. Hot cloud storage.
It's kind of like my mom when she, you don't have another kid when you hit perfection on the first go round. So, well,
oh, you too, huh?
I have another tier, right? So
yeah, very good.
Why does Veeam Enterprise limit to 2 scale-up backup repositories? They're worried about this being a limiting factor when they have to create the new object lock buckets.
Say it again. Why does Veeam, I'm looking for that question. Why does Veeam limit?
The last one. Limit to 2 scale-out backup repositories.
There's no technical reason. It's just a licensing reason. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure. but I believe I reach out to your Veeam sales guy because I want to say that we started a new licensing thing where you can upgrade to the Enterprise Plus license or VUL license, and that will remove that limitation. But again, check with your sales guy because they're the expert on all the licensing issues.
Gotcha. Is it necessary to create another local storage space other than that principal job backup in order to send the data to Wasabi?
No, it's so if you're already taking a Veeam backup today and it's landing on local storage somewhere, that is your performance tier. So you could use that as a performance tier, or you could create another folder on that, that storage, and treat that as the new repository or a new performance tier. But no, you shouldn't need any extra, storage to enable use of Wasabi.
Gotcha. Drew, when I enable object lock, does that take up more storage capacity in Wasabi, or should it be the same amount of space as it used to be?
It uses all the same space. Yep. I'll just leave it right there. No difference whatsoever. Yes, it involves enabling versioning, but that doesn't impact the capacity that you consume for your backups.
When restoring from a locked object, you mentioned that once it's restored, you aren't able to edit any data. Is there a form of Wasabi immutability that allows us to unlock the data before restoring?
No. So let me clarify, I guess, a couple of things there. So when you restore the data, whatever you've restored is fully editable. That's restored data. The backup file itself that's stored on Wasabi is immutable, not able to be edited. So if you are trying to say, let's do a restoration and be able to change a few things or do whatever, you totally can do that. But that backup file that you've placed on Wasabi is what can't be edited.
That's right.
Can I still do health check restores the same way as I always did?
Yep.
Beautiful.
That was easy.
Yeah. Some don't need a long answer, right? So.
I don't see object lock as an option in my Wasabi console right now. Is that because I'm on a trial account? How do I?
Well, that's because we haven't fully put it out for general availability. We're wrapping up the beta now, and soon. Be patient. You'll see it imminently.
If my local copy becomes corrupt, how do I recover from the Wasabi storage?
It's a good question. So it took me a second there to click in what you're asking, but so within the Veeam console itself, you can see in the main backup screen, there's a place that says object. If you click on that, you can see all the backups that would be stored on Wasabi. And if you right click on one of the backups, you can say copy to performance tier or download to performance tier, and it will bring that copy back down to performance tier. It also leaves it in Wasabi, but it also puts another copy back locally. So you can bring that backup back local for that reason. Like you said, you deleted it or something happened to it. So there are ways to restore that data, restore that backup to the performance tier.
So just to make sure that I didn't screw this up before, right? When we saw the demo from Chris, right? Mm-hmm. He said that in Veeam, when you are using immutability, it then renders your local copy on the performance tier in a way that you can't delete it. Was that a correct statement?
No. So
okay.
Yeah. So there are. It's kind of one of these tricky situations. We do have local immutable support now. So we have a Veeam hardened Linux repository, and that enables immutability on that. But if you're copying the backup back down local, you should be able to edit it, and you can bring it back into your performance tier. It will still leave the immutable version in Wasabi as well. But that's kind of what that use case was for, to be able to bring that copy back local, to be able to work with it, make it part of the Now, what he may be meaning is that it wouldn't be part of that backup chain, but you'd be able to bring that backup like local.
No, I think the question is referring to in the demo that Chris did. He tried to delete the local copy related to the immutable copy on Wasabi, and Veeam throws an error saying that you can't delete that.
Okay, then yes, that's what if you're referring to bringing the immutable copy back down to on-prem, then yes, it will keep that lock period on the when we bring it down.
Okay.
A lot of people will try to say bring that copy from capacity tier back to performance tier and have it be part of that chain. Say if all my backups on-prem were deleted from a disaster, I could pull all those backups back down to on-prem and be able to do restores. A lot of times that's what people are referring to, that kind of disaster recovery situation on-prem.
Got it. Okay.
We have just a few more minutes and only about 5 questions left, so I think we can do it. If I do a daily immutable backup for a week with 10-day retention, do I save then 10 times the amount of data locally in Wasabi than I would have if it wasn't immutable?
Do I save 10x the amount? No. I'm not sure how you got the 10x other than it being 10 days. But if you do a daily immutable for a week with a 10-day retention, not to get too deep into, when we write data to object, like I said before, we use that block generation, but part of that is we look for the same blocks,
right? And
we don't move that data twice. So when if we take a look at the average week, you do a full backup and then you do 6 incrementals and then there's another full. There's a high probability that both of these fulls have a lot of the same data. So we don't move that. We don't move, the data that's already up there. So it's hard to say that you'll see 10x, 5x, whatever. It really depends on what data is being protected. But to answer the question is you will see some space savings just because of the compression and dedupe and things like that. But I can't give you a generic 10x, savings kind of thing.
If I have a client that leaves and their object lock hasn't yet expired, can their bucket be terminated?
No. That's part of the nature of immutable objects. Yeah. And again, goes back to the conversation earlier about using the lock extension versus creating locks that are extremely long-term. So yeah, long story short, that data is going to be there a while, until the retention period ends.
That is a great question, though, from a point of you need to, as an MSP or whatever, take a step back and kind of look at your contracts, because now you say, listen, if you want to use immutable or object lock, you're responsible till the end of that date, like for that data. And yeah, it's a good point.
Awesome. I just have a few more questions that are a little bit more specific to different situations. So if you continue to have more questions, please reach out to Wasabi, sales@wasabi.com. We can get you connected with the right Veeam rep or Dustin, or get your questions answered. But wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. We got a Wasabi record for number of people on a webinar, so we're very excited. We know that this is a huge feature and everyone's very excited about it. So thank you for joining us, and thanks Dustin and Drew for all of your knowledge on the subject.
No problem. Happy to be here.
One last plug for the resources right below. You can have the presentation link, as well as, a copy of this webinar will be emailed out to everyone, so you can watch it over and over and over again. With that, I think we're all set for today. So thanks again, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.